Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'm here to welcome you to Storytelling by Linda Wright, who's my wife. I'm Randy Wright. Mrs. Wright has been a storyteller for more than 15 years. Her passion is to make history come alive as she assumes the identity of various leaders in history. Queen in Africa, Nicole Nichols, Michael Jackson, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Coretta Scott King. Mrs. Wright mesmerizes audiences with folktales from around the world, as well as from her own personal life. She leads storytelling workshops in elementary schools, summer schools, and senior centers. For the last 10 years, Mrs. Wright has been actively involved in classes at Stage Bridge Performing Arts Center in Oakland and with the Northern California Storytelling Association. You can find her on YouTube under Linda D Wright's Performances. Sign up for a mailing list to receive occasional notifications of her public performances. Today, Mrs. Wright becomes living history as she plays the role of Harriet Tubman. To understand her better, this map over here shows the United States in 1861. The red states show the states that fought for the Confederate Army during the Civil War. They wanted slavery to remain. Harriet Tubman lived as a slave in the state of Maryland, which is actually a blue state, but Maryland still had slaves. When Harriet ran away from slavery, she lived in the north in Philadelphia and Auburn, New York, which is upstate New York, and St. Catherine, Canada, which is not pictured here, but would be above the state of New York. Right above New York, right up here. This picture shows how to find the North Star, which guided many slaves to find freedom. That's what the gold stars actually stand for up there. Find freedom north of the red colored states. Today, I want you to imagine this is the year 1910. 1910. 1910. Now it's time to meet Harriet Tubman.
Ooh, look at all these fine-looking people coming for my 90th birthday party. Well, maybe 92. You know, I was born in 1820, maybe 1822. I was a slave, and slaves, we don't exactly know when our birthdays are. You see, my mama was Harriet Green Ross, and she was a slave. And everyone who is a slave, every woman, their children are automatically slaves. My father was Ben Ross, and my mama and my papa, they had 9 children. Now, I didn't get to know my 3 older children very much because by the time they were 12, 14, Master Brodus decided to sell them out of state. And when you sell a slave out of state, we're in Maryland at the very top of the slave states. That means you go down to Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and you work in the cotton fields. And you never see them again. So I never saw my sisters again. And I was the next one as a girl to be sold. But when I was 5 years old, Master Brodus, that's the one who owned my mama, and then he owned all of us kids. Master Brodus decided to hire me out. And I was kind of eager to go, but my mama wasn't coming with me. And when Mr. Cook come to put me on the back of his horse, and he took me all the way to his house, and it took us all day. And I didn't know when I was going to see my mama again. The last time I saw her, she was looking at me so sad. And now when I got to the Cook's house, they didn't treat me very well. I mean, Mrs. Cook tried to have me work in the house, but I'm 5, 6 years old. Anyone in this room 5 or 6 years old? Anyone 5? You're 5? Can you stand up?
6.
You're 6, can you stand up, honey? Oh, let everybody see this 6-year-old. That's how big I was when I went on the back of that horse to go off to the Mr. Cook's house. Oh, 6 years old. Now, most 6 years old are going to school. Are you going to school? Homeschool. I didn't get a chance to homeschool, no school, nothing. It was against the law for me to go to school. It was against the law for me to know how to read and to write. Oh, I'm so happy you get to know how to read and to write and to go to school, because I didn't get a chance to do that. No, I didn't. But instead, I was working for the Cooks. Mr. Cook, he took me from his wife and had me out in the river working with his muskrats. Ooh, they had those sharp teeth and they had those claws. Nasty things. And I was in the river, even in the month of January and February, when it was cold, really cold. And I got so low down sick with the measles and fevers and all other kinds of things. My mother said to Master Brodus, "Sir, you better get my daughter back here. She ain't no good to you dead." So he listened to her, and he brought me back. Oh, it was so nice to be with my mama. Oh, to be back in her arms and to have her nurse me. Oh. But as soon as I got well again, he hired me out to somebody else. And off I go. Miss Susie. She was not kind to me. No, 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 no. She had me do all kinds of things, and she didn't like none of it. She sent me back to Master Brodus, and then I was off to someone else. And I just grew up like a neglected weed, going from one house to the next. And finally I decided I wasn't going to do such a good job so that they could send me back to Master Brodus and my mama. And that's what happened. Oh, yes, 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 yes. So somehow by the time I was 10, anybody in this room 9 or 10 years old? Or maybe, oh, I see a couple hands back there. All right, I see a hand right there. Well, you know what I was doing? I was working in the field from the time I got up until the time I went to bed. But I would rather be out in that field with the blue skies over me and the possums and the snakes and the deers and the dirt than working inside that house with those mistresses who were really, really mean to me. Anyone in this room 12 years old? 11 or 12? Oh, I see 11. 11? All right. Well, I was about your size then. When I went down to the corner store, the cook, she wanted me to help her with get some provisions for the family dinner that night. And I went down to the general store, and I heard an argument inside. Now, the cook, she didn't go in, but I did. Through the back door, I went and put my head in, and I saw the overseer. Now, overseer is a person, it's like a foreman. He's in charge of the slaves and their output. And he is usually a mean man because he wants a certain quota of work from them, and if they don't do it, he has his own ways of getting them to obey him. Well, I stuck my head in there, and it changed my life. Because that overseer was in there, and he had this weight in his hand. It was like a silver weight, and he took it, and he went, and he threw it. And he wasn't trying to hit me. He was trying to hit another slave that was there by the door who he didn't like there to be in that store. And it hit me right here, and I fell out flat. And I was out for several days. And they had carried me off to a barn and left me in there. There's no doctors for slaves. No, no doctors. But about the third day I got back up, and I was out back in the fields with blood and sweat coming down my face. Ooh, it was no life at all being a slave. It was no life at all. It was miserable. It was unfair. It was unjust. There was nothing good that happened to us. Nothing. Everybody was cruel to us. Nobody who I ever met in my life said they wanted to be a slave or wanted to return to slavery or that slavery was a good thing for them. It was a terrible thing. But one thing that happened was after I recovered from having that hit on my head was that I started to have visions. I could be out there and I could be chopping wood. And I would go to sleep. You could poke me, you could hit me, you could kick me, you could yell at me, anything. And I would not wake up. Ooh, but when I woke up, oh, the visions that I seen, a music that you can't even hear on earth, and the voice of the Lord just talking to me, and angels, and me flying over the plantations. And then there'd be, in some of my visions, there would be white ladies, beautiful white ladies, helping me over a fence. And I couldn't understand all of that, but the other slaves, when they heard that I had these visions, they would go, Harriet, tell all your troubles. She's got the touch. She can help you. She's got second sight. Ooh, Harriet, tell your problems. She's got insight. Ooh. And I was kind of elevated in the eyes of them. But Master Brodus, when he found out that I was falling asleep at work, he tried to sell me to the nearest neighbors, but they wouldn't take me not for a penny. But then he sold me to, he didn't sell me, but he hired me out to Doc Thompson. Now, Doc Thompson is where my pa was, Ben Ross. And Ben said that the best thing you could have as a slave is your reputation. That's the only thing you can own. And he was an honest man, and he always wanted to make sure he was an honest man. And Doc Thompson had him in charge of his timber. And he had all these people working for him, and he'd tell them what tree to cut down, which one not to, and do this and to do that with all the trees. He knew everything. Oh, I was so happy to be reunited with my pa. And I would tell him my visions, and that one day I'm going to be free. And he would tell me, Harriet, this is what you're going to do. You're going to make sure you know about the North Star. That's what's going to guide you. It doesn't move around at night. Look at the Big Dipper and at the big end of it, and it'll point to that North Star. He told me about the moss will grow on the north side of the tree, and just touch that if you can't see the stars. He told me how to walk through the forest and how to mark my trail. Sometimes the runaway slaves will run, and they don't know where they are, and it's nighttime, and they don't even realize it, but they're just going right back, and they get caught. But he told me how to mark my trail so I go straight to the north. Oh, my papa believed in me. Oh, he told me so many things. Then as I got older, about the age of 24, anyone in here 24? Oh, I got one hand back there. Well, when I was 24 and I was working for my pa, I met somebody. And I was looking at him, and he was looking at me. His name was John Tubman. Now, he was a free man. He was not a slave. Had John. But he liked me. But it meant that if we had any children, that our children would be slaves. But that didn't matter to him. He loved me and I loved him, so we jumped the broom. That's how slaves got married. We couldn't go to a church and get married. No. Masters won't have that. But we had to get married. We set up housekeeping together. I started telling him my dreams. Whew. I just didn't know what it was going to be like telling him my dreams. I told him my dreams. And I thought he'd be right there with me for it. Whew, but that John. He said, Harriet, don't you be talking that way. You can't be going off to the north. You a slave. You have to stay here and work for Master Brodus. You cannot be running away. And if you try or talk about it anymore, I'm going to tell Master Brodus on you. Ooh. I could have fallen right on my face with that news. Here is my husband who I'm married to. And he in his heart was more of a slave than I was in my body. Well, I didn't tell him any more of my dreams after that. And I told my family, don't listen, don't tell him anything, because he'll tell on you. Well, because of my visions, I got so bold, I went to Doc Thompson and said, I want to hire myself out. And I'll give you a little bit of the money, but I'm going to keep most of it to myself. Do you know what he said? He said, all right. So I was making pies. I was making gingerbread and root beer and selling it all over the place there in Dorchester County, Maryland. I even had enough money to buy some steers. And I was going around with anyone, the poor blacks, the poor whites who had property. I was plowing their fields for them and keeping that money and giving just a little bit back to Doc Thompson. I was a businesswoman. But when I was out there selling those pies, I met Hannah Leverton. She was a Quaker woman. They always speak with these and thous. And she was said to me, thou art not to be a slave, Harriet. Thou art to be free. When thou art ready to go to the north, I will help thee. I will tell thee how to get there. And I have friends who will help thee. Ooh, you would have thought that I would have just right then and there said, yes, I'm going to the north, I'm going to the north. But no, it would mean I have to leave my husband. I'd have to leave Maryland, the trees, the air of Maryland. My whole family, my mama, my papa, my brothers, everyone would have to, I'd have to leave them all behind. And I wasn't quite ready to do that. But every time I saw Hannah, she just encouraged me to no end. But by then, I got to be 27. Anyone in here 27 years old? No 27-year-old. Maybe 28? 29? Well, you know, I don't exactly know my age. All right. Well, it was in 1849 when the slaves started saying, Harriet, Ben, Henry, Robert, they're going to be sold. They're going to be sold down south to Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee. They're going to be picking that cotton. They're going to join a chain gang, a chain gang, a chain gang. I wasn't going to let that happen, no, so I went and got my brothers, and I said Saturday night on September 15th, we're going off to Maryland. Hannah Leverton has given me the way to go and people to help us. And we left that Saturday night. But somewhere that Saturday night, I knew where to go, but they didn't. And they got so scared. You know, Harriet, those poor folk up there, because they're going to eat us alive. That's what the master said. They just eat us alive. We can't go up there to the north. And then my other brother would say, my baby's going to have, my wife's going to have a baby soon. I got to get back. So they took me back into slavery. Ooh, I was mad, I was mad, I was mad. Ooh. But come Monday morning on the 17th, I was heading back out. And I went over to Doc Thompson's place to try to talk to my cousin, Mary. She was one of his cooks. But they were so busy in that kitchen because I felt if I could tell her something, she could tell my folk that I was okay. And no one would come and try to get her and be mean to her about why I wasn't around anymore. But I went over there, and she was so busy in there, so I just left there and started across that big old lawn of Doc Thompson. And here he comes on his horse, riding that horse right towards me. And he stops, and I stop. And something inside of me just rose up. Now, I don't sing the way I used to sing when I was 27 years old. Remember, this is my 90th birthday party. But I just started singing, farewell, farewell, I'm going to the promised land. And Doc Thompson just sat on his horse and looked at me. And I just kept on singing, and I kept belting it, so everyone in that house, everyone in the fields, everywhere would hear my voice and know that I was taken off. Farewell, farewell, I'm going to the promised land. Doc Thompson and just kept on walking. I looked back and he was still on his horse looking at me, and I kept walking to the forest and he was still there looking at me, and I just kept going. And now that I'm out, away in the forest, you guys are going to encourage me. Because when I left a couple days ago, my brother's soul discouraged me. But I need your help. So this side, you're going to say, run, Harriet, run.
Run, Harriet, run.
This side is going to say, hide, Harriet, hide.
Hide, Harriet, hide.
Try that again.
Hide, Harriet. Hide, Harriet.
Run, Harriet, run. Hide, Harriet, hide. Run, Harriet, run.
Where am I going? I'm going to the north. And there's a document that was written in such and such year. And it said that all men are created equal. Does anyone know what document that is? Raise your hand so I can call on you, as they do in most schools that I never got a chance to go to. Anyone know what document I'm talking about? Well, I have one person smiling at me really hard. I have someone over here who's whispering it, and here it has another one, but I'm gonna go on you. What were you thinking?
Me?
Yes?
Declaration of Independence.
That's right. Say it nice and loud.
The Declaration of Independence.
What year was that written?
1774?
76. 1776. And Thomas Jefferson was one of the ones who wrote it. And the first time he wrote it, he had a clause in there that slavery was supposed to end in the United States. But because of the Southern gentleman, he took that out. He said that maybe someday, there won't be any slavery in our nation. So, what I'm going to say is you're going to say,
Run, Harriet, run. Hide, Harriet, hide.
and why am I going to freedom? You're going to say, because all men are created equal. Because all men are created equal. And where's that written? The Declaration of Independence, 1776. Why am I running to freedom? All men are created equal. Where's that written? The Declaration of Independence, 1776. Now, I didn't get a chance to go to no school, but I know about the Declaration of Independence. And I think you're all going to know for sure after today, too. All right. So, I'm in the woods, and I'm going to
Run, Harriet, run. Hide, Harriet, hide. Run, Harriet, run. Hide, Harriet, hide.
And why am I going to freedom?
All men are created equal.
And where's that written?
The Declaration of Independence, 1776.
Woo! I'm going to be free. I'm going to be free. Yes. Woo! So I'm walking, and I go through a river in case there were some dogs who I could lose their scent. And I go and I hide, and I run, and I hide, and I run, and I hide, and I get to my first town. And Hannah Leverton had given me the woman's name. And I knocked on her back door. She opened it, and she handed me a broom, and she said, okay, go sweep my yard, sweep everything. So I was out there sweeping and sweeping and sweeping and sweeping, and that night her husband come in, and he puts me in the back of their wagon. And he takes me in that wagon. So all I have to do this time is
Hide, Harriet, hide.
in the bottom of that wagon. And he took me to the next town, and he got me out of that wagon, and he whispered to me where to go. So then, that morning, I went to that person's house, and they hid me in their house. And that night, that person told me I had to
Run, Harriet, run. Hide, Harriet, hide. Run, Harriet, run. Hide, Harriet, hide.
and I sure did. Some nights, I was hiding inside of the roots of trees, sometimes in caves. Other nights, I was in people's houses. But it took me 15 dark nights to get up to the Pennsylvania state line. And oh, when I saw that Pennsylvania Pennsylvania state line sign. I didn't know what it said, but I knew what it was because people had told me what it would look like. And I got down on my knees and I kissed the ground and I rest. And I said, oh, glory, glory, glory. Look at my hands. They're free. Look at me. Oh, the air is different. Everything is more beautiful up here in the north. But my family, my mother and my father, my brothers and my sister, they are still slaves. How can I be free when they're still slaves? Right then and there, I decided that when I go up to the north, I was going to come back and get each one of them out. And the north. There's no one to celebrate with me. Nobody to know my name. But I'm going to work and I'm going to earn money and I'm going to go back and I'm going to get them out one by one. So in Philadelphia, I made my way to William Still's office, and he was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, a major conductor. Because runaway slaves would come to his office and they would tell him where they come from, and he would tell them where they could go and get housing, and then if anyone else from that plantation comes, he would tell them where they were. So he was like a phone book, for those of you who knows what phone books are. And he had me do some work. And I went over to New Jersey to the resorts, and I was cooking, and I was sewing, and I was cleaning, and I was making money. And then I was going to the abolitionist meetings. Oh, the abolitionists. Oh, most of the meetings I went to, the abolitionists, they were white women, white men, some black men and women, and they hated slavery. They wanted to figure out ways to end it, and they were always collecting money to help runaway slaves get to the north. And I became one of their major speakers. Ooh, and they would put money in my pockets, and I finally had some money to go back down to the south. And I would get the train from Philadelphia and go down to Maryland, to Baltimore. Because no one's looking for a runaway slave going from the north to the south. That was the fastest way to get there. And then I would have a dock hand. Now, John Tubman, who I hadn't talked to in years, his brothers were free, and they worked on the docks. And they would tell me who I could trust, who not to trust, and they would help get me on a boat and take me all that down to Dorchester County. And I got back down there to get my husband John, to tell him, and to get my brothers. But my brothers were obstinate. Nah, Harriet, this is planting time. Another time they go, nah, Harriet, I'm not going. The days are too long. We need to go in the wintertime when the days are short. Another one would say, nah, Harriet, my wife's about to have a baby. I can't go yet. And then John, I found out that man had taken up with another woman. And he sent a message back to me saying he did not care about going to the north. He was just fine and happy being there in Maryland. Ooh. Ooh. I just cut him right out of my heart. My brothers were ready, but there were other people who were. And there might be 8 people, and I'll just take them on. And we're going up to the north. And then I would go talk to some more people in the abolitionists, and I would tell them about my plans, and they'd give me money. But in 1850, there was a fugitive slave law that said that any slave who left the South and was found in the North could be captured and taken back to the South. So all these people who I had helped so far, I had to take them all the way up to Canada. Whew, that was a long ways, but I did it. And then 5 years after I had left, I woke up with a vision. It was a nightmare. Ooh, and I saw these men on horses coming, and they're coming to get my brothers, and they were coming to snatch them and to take them further down into the South. And I knew this time my brothers were going to be sold. How? How to make them realize that they're going to be sold. Because every time they've been so obstinate and so stubborn, and they haven't come with me. What can I do? teaching his friend to write a letter. And he read it. It was in code. We talked about this and that, you know, this and that, this and that. Then I said, give my love to the old folk. Tell my brothers, give them my love. And when the old ship of Zion come, make sure they get on board and sail away. And I signed it by this man's adopted son, William Jacobson. So the letter was to Jacob Jacobson, his father, who was a freedman in Dorchester County. So I mailed that letter, and Jacob later told me that the postmen, you know, they read all the mail from black people. They read all the mail of white people who they think are helping black people run away. And so, of course, they had opened up his letter. They couldn't figure out what it meant. So they had Jacob Jacobson come right in to their office. And he come riding on a horse. He gets off his horse. He ties it up. He goes in through the front door of that post office. And they say, yeah, boy. Now, he ain't no boy. He's a grown man. Boy, read this letter and tell us what it means. And he just takes it in his hand and he says, give my love to the old folk. Well, they done died. I don't have no old folk. And I ain't got no brothers either. And get on the old board of the ship of Zion. I ain't gonna die. Oh, this letter is a fraud. And he throws it on the ground and walks out of the post office. But he gets on his horse and he goes straight to Ben. Then he rides over to Robert. Then he rides over to Henry to tell them that I'm coming and get on board this time. So when I come, it was Christmas Eve, December 24th. And it was raining. It was raining. I come and I have a messenger who goes off and tells my brothers to meet me at the appointed place that I had talked, that they knew that I was always going to be there to take people off to the north, to be there right after darkness. We had 40 miles to get to my father's house. Because my father by this time is free. His owner has set him free, given him 10 acres of timber, land, and a cabin. And my father had bought my mother. She was supposed to have been free when she was 45. That was what a will said. And in my old days, I actually hired a lawyer to find out what that will really said. My mother and all her children were supposed to be free at 45. None of them were. None of them were supposed to ever be sold out of state line. At least 3 of them were, my 3 sisters. Anyway, they went and got my brothers and told them, and I was waiting. Now, Henry come, but when Henry come, he come with his fiancée, Jane. Now, Jane was owned by Horatio Jones. And Horatio Jones was a mean man and wouldn't let Jane and my brother get married. He said no. And he treated her so cruelly. Well, my brother had hid some men's clothes there on his property, on Horatio Jones' property, and she dressed in those that night and came on over. She was there right on time. My brother was there right on time. Henry was there on time, but not Robert. We don't know where Robert is. But I am a general in this army of getting people to the north, and I wait on nobody. So it's time to go, we leave. And the rain is coming on down, and I'm thinking as we're running up 40 miles to get to my father's place, should I tell them I'm here? I haven't seen my parents for 5 years, and it's Christmas Eve. Oh my, if I opened that door and said, Mama, I'm here, and she would just holler and scream and be so happy, I'd be the best thing I could do for her. And we sing those Christmas carols, Silent Night, and Oh, little town of Bethlehem. But that would be the worst present I could give them. Because when the slave catchers come looking for my brothers on December 26th, because that's what the poster said, they were going to be sold on December 26th. Most slaves were sold the day after Christmas so that the master would have his books straight for January 1st. And if they sell them out of the state, they can make at least $400. If they sell them in-state, it'll be about $200. Well, we're on our way. And my parents, do I tell them? But no, Because that slave catcher on December 26th would be coming there and they'd be breaking down their door and open it and telling my mama, where are your boys? And her boys aren't boys, they're men. And she'd be kind of happy and excited and not being able to tell them she hadn't seen them. And then they would take her in their place. And they would do things to my mama that would not be good to do. And they would put her in prison and give her a fine, and my father probably lose his property for helping runaway slaves. No, I can't do that. So we hid in the corn crib. And there were 2 other men who came and joined us. And I had them go and knock on the back door and let my papa know that we were there and to bring us some food. So he would come to the door of the barn and he would have his back and just say, here's the food, I can't see you. I'm an honest man and I can't see you. When they come asking if I've seen you, I could say, no, I have not seen you. So he put the food in there and he'd go back in. Later on, he'd come out with some more. And we could go up at nighttime and look through the the holes in the windows and around in the cabin and look through and see my mama. She just sitting there rocking with her head on her hands when she knows trouble's coming. Because she's been looking for her sons coming. It's Christmas Day now. And she's been out looking up and down the road for her sons coming with their families, and no one's coming. Oh, it was so hard not to go in there and talk to my mama. It was so hard. Also, Robert, he come and join us. He made it all through the night. The thing that had delayed him is that his wife was giving birth to a baby. And he was trying to leave, but the baby was coming so fast that he had to help her deliver that baby. And then she named the baby Harriet. And here I am, taking the baby's father. Now, I'm not taking him, but it was still hard. And she told him when she realized that he wasn't coming back, don't forget about me and your children. And he promised that he'd come back. Well, you know, he never did come back. And when I told him I'm coming back to go get your kids, he didn't volunteer to come with me. I wouldn't take him anyway if he had. He would just be gumming up the works. No, I work on my own. But I got my brothers 4 days to Philadelphia. I know how to get places now. I know how to get to Philadelphia in 4 days, but it took me 15 the first time. Yeah. Another time I had to go and get my parents because my father had helped some other men escape. They had stayed at his place. And they had escaped north, but one of them decided to turn back. Now, I had been their general on that trip. He would not have turned back because I would have told you, if you don't come with me, you're not going to be alive tomorrow because I'm going to get rid of you. Because if you go back, you're going to tell. And that's exactly what happened. That one man, he got so scared, he went back. And when the slave catchers caught him, he told everything. And my father was going to go to jail, and my mama. But I made this chariot. It was a chariot. Old broken arm down thing with an old horse, and I got them out. And my father, his hands are all crippled with arthritis. By now he's 80 years old, and he wanted to bring his tools. He said, Pa, this thing is not going to take your tools. My mama wanted to take her feather bed. Mama, you can't take nothing. Get in. So they got on. And I got them up to the train station in Delaware. And from there on, my Quaker friends took care of them because who my mama could be. She was so bitter. She could be complaining all the time. But if you think about all the things that happened to her, you can understand why she would be bitter. Now, it's close to 1861. Something happened a few years before that. I had been in Auburn, New York quite a bit as an abolitionist, speaking at their meetings. And Mrs. Seward, William Seward, was the Secretary of State later on for Abraham Lincoln, but he was running for president. And he sat me down. He said, after we had some tea and all, he was a good man, William Seward. Good man. He said, "Harriet, you don't have no home. You don't have your own place to lay your head. You just running all over the place. I want to provide a home for you." A home for me? A home? What do you mean, Mr. Seward? A house. Now, my son and I, we buy property and we build these little houses for black people for them to buy, and they give us an interest for it. It's a low interest. But I would like to give you 7 acres right down the road from me. 7 acres? Mr. Seward. Yes, 7 acres. So you could have your home for the age there. There's a brick house there, some other buildings. You could have all your chickens and your goats and your pigs, whatever you need. Your family could be there. It is there for you. How would you like to buy it for $1,200? $1,200? Yes, and I want you to give me $25 down. I could do that. $25, I could do that. And $40 a year as your mortgage. Oh, Mr. Seward. I have a home. I have property. I grew up like a neglected weed, but nothing. Just living in a shack and living on people's porches and their kitchen floors and everything else. And now I have a home. That William Seward, he was something else. I was sad when he didn't become the president of the United States, but Abraham Lincoln, my dear Abraham Lincoln, he hired him as his Secretary of State. And William Seward did a good job for Abraham Lincoln. He kept France and British Empire from interfering with the Civil War. I like that William Seward. I didn't see this coming. I didn't have a vision of this. But the night that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, they also went and attacked William Seward. And they wounded him, but he recovered. And then in 1867, he went into negotiations with Russia to buy Alaska. Who would ever think we would ever want Alaska? But he paid Russia $7.2 million, 2 cents an acre. That William Seward was a smart man. Some people call it Seward's folly. But no, he was a smart man. That's my Seward. He can't do nothing wrong. I love my Mr. Seward. Well, when Abraham Lincoln became the president, it was in March, his inaugural speech. A few days later, the South secedes from the Union. South Carolina had already done it. Virginia does it a little bit later. But Jefferson Davis becomes the president of the Confederate States. And their first capital was in Montgomery, Alabama, and there they wrote their Constitution. And what do you think they said about slavery in that Constitution? They said that no law should be made that prohibits anyone from owning slaves. Ooh, that Confederate state, they want slavery to continue. Oh, the United States, we were all at rest. We knew that the war was coming. Abraham Lincoln was calling for volunteers, and then down in the South, the Confederate Army, they were calling for volunteers. And I wanted to be a part of it. Because one night, when I was staying at somebody's house, I woke up, I had a vision. Ooh, glory, glory, glory. My people are free, my people are free. Ooh, my people are free, my people are free. Ooh. And that family just looked at me. Are you mad? There's been no war. Slavery's going to be here for another at least 40 years. Oh, no. I seen it in my time. In my time, that slaves are going to be free. And it's coming soon. It's coming soon. So I had to figure out a way to get to the South. I talked to all my connections, and they finally introduced me to Governor Andrew in Massachusetts. I went on over to Boston, and he had me join 53 people who are going to go down to South Carolina, because I cannot tell you the cruelty of those slaves in South Carolina. Ooh. Tens of thousands of black people were freed as our army was winning the war down there. But what to do with them? Because see, they were commanded, forced. When the mothers would cook their meals, the children would come and get their food and go off by themselves in the bushes to eat alone. And even though now these people were free, they were still still acting like slaves and just crippled by the way the slave owners had treated them. And they needed to be taught. So Governor Andrew had teachers and lawyers and doctors, people to know how to run the cotton industry down there, because there was some fine-looking cotton and some great rice growing down there in South Carolina, but there was no one there to conduct a harvest. So I went on down there to South Carolina, and I was there. I was so happy to be there. I had a wash house, and I was teaching all the women how to wash the soldiers' clothes, how to take care of the soldiers, feed them for money. I taught them about money and how to get good money for their work. And I had an eating place where I was making pies and selling them to the soldiers. I was making root beer and my gingerbread and selling it. And I was meeting men who were telling me where the Confederate Army had left all their different things. Ammunition here, Army stuff over here, food over here. And I would go and tell James Montgomery, he was the colonel. Later on, I'll tell Colonel Shaw. I was working with General Higgins and General Hunter. All these different men respected me. They trusted in the things that I told them. And because of the things that I told them, we won many of the raids that we did down there. One of the biggest days for me was when we got on the John Adams. It was a ferry boat, and we went down the Combahee River. It was a twisty, muddy, little old river, but about 20 miles down, there were some more plantations. And the slaves were still working as slaves. So I was there at the helm. With me was Walter Plowden. He was helping me, and we went on down there, and he knows about the tides and the currents. It took all night to get there. But when the Negro soldiers got off of the 3 boats that we were there, and they got out into the water, and the fog was coming up, and those women were on their rice pots, and they were cooking, and they looked up. They put these blankets on top of their head. They put their rice pots on top of their head, and they grab a baby, and the baby be holding on, and the baby be running in there and getting their rice pot, putting it in their mouth, and going back and putting it in their mouth. The men were out there in the fields, and they were hoeing the fields, and they would throw down their hoes, and they would come out to the boats. And then their masters were saying, "Yankee here, hi. Send you Cuba, because that's what they said. That's what made all the slaves scared, was that they would be sent to Cuba to work in the sugarcane fields. But they were throwing down their plows, and they were running up, getting up on those boats, and we were taking them away. That was one of my proudest moments during the Civil War. Now, I didn't have no vision that Abraham Lincoln was going to be assassinated. I didn't have any vision that William Seward was going to be hurt. No, I didn't. I sure didn't. But after the war, I met with Sarah Bradford. She was a white woman who helped me. And she wrote down all the things I could tell her about my life. And she published a book. It sold out. She came and interviewed me again. Published another book. It sold out. People wanted to know about me. And even in the Civil War, there were articles about what I was doing. But the U.S. government wouldn't pay me. William Seward and so many other people had to fight for me. It took about 20 years before I was able to get $20 a month from the government. And I fought for women's right to vote, for black people's right to vote. I didn't just sit still after the war. No. And then at home for the aged, I had so many people coming and living with me. White people, black people. It don't matter what color your skin is. Just as long as you have it in your heart to do right by people. Slavery was a terrible thing. It fueled the economy of the United States, but it also fueled hatred, injustice, unfairness, prejudice, racism. So many things that were wrong. And yes, I was wrong to steal people from the South, but the law was wicked. And I was right to do what I did. And so I want to thank you for coming to my birthday party, for coming and celebrating with me my 90th birthday. And you all can look at the different things around the room that I have to tell you a little bit more about the Underground Railroad in my life. But thank you so much for coming.
Happy birthday.
I have Karis right here, my youngest daughter. And yes, you hold her. There's two. If someone else want to help her hold, would you? Come on up. All right. So you can hold it like this. Two hands. There we go. Thank you. All right. In this hand right here, I think she's 4 years old. Yes. Harriet Tubman's headstone in a non-segregated cemetery in Auburn, New York.
Gonna be 5 in 2 days.
All right. So,
And I'm gonna have my birthday at the museum.
all right, all right. Okay, so there's Harriet Tubman where she was buried at. And this here is Harriet Tubman's home in Auburn, New York that William Seward gave to her. And it was just amazing to be in that house. And his house is right down the road, and it's open also as a museum for you to go into. And it's really amazing to be there and to see the place that he gave for her to lay her head down. Thank you.
Who's the woman in the picture?
This is me.
Oh, that's you.
That's me. There and on the front porch.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
So if anyone has any questions, I will try to answer them. If not, I'm sure someone in the audience can.
How long did she live?
She lived until she was 93 years old, and she died of pneumonia in Auburn, New York. And the last couple of years, she was in a wheelchair. But every once in a while, because she was like a nomad, because she always was traveling all around the place, she would get out of her wheelchair and just crawl. And she would scare kids, because the grass would be tall, she'd just be crawling in there. And they didn't know she was coming up behind them. You have a question? Yes. What's the Underground Railroad? Ah, that's a good question. The Underground Railroad were houses, maybe about 20, 30 miles apart, and they were usually owned by Quakers or free blacks, and that's where at nighttime, the black people would travel at nighttime, and then they would get into the house in the daytime and hide out in that house throughout the day. And they might be in their barns, they may have a basement where they go or something like that. And they would move them to the north until they got up into Pennsylvania. And then when the Fugitive Slave Act came, then they had to take them from Pennsylvania all the way up to Canada. Yes?
Do you think it was fear that kept the freed people from wanting other people to be free?
Oh, you mean like John Tubman?
Yes.
Yes, and I think also he was just, some people are just stuck in a system, and he can't imagine something not being outside of that system. So yes, there was definitely,
But he was more
he was
privileged.
free. He was privileged, he had a certain privileges. And he probably felt better than the slaves, but yet not good enough in himself, possibly because of all of the things done to him, even though he was free, to even have that courage to even want to go up to the north. Even though his brothers were up in Baltimore, they had a lot more freedom up in Baltimore, but he didn't have that feeling. Yes.
Did she have faith or religion that played a part in everything she did and her visions?
Yes, because in her vision, she was talking to the Lord. Thomas Garrett, who was a Quaker, said that he has never known anyone who has talked to God or heard God's voice as much as Harriet Tubman. And she lived by faith, and so many of her songs were from, go down Moses, go down to Pharaoh's land, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. And she would sing that song, and she loved God very, very much. So her faith was very much a part of everything she did. And she said she was never scared to go anywhere, because there was 3 months once that she was living in Dorchester County, and she would actually see Doc Thompson coming towards her. But she said she was never scared of being captured because she was always in the will of God, and he wouldn't allow her that to happen. So he was coming straight to her. She just put her bonnet down. She had a live chicken in her hand. She made them start squawking, and he got out of the road away from her. And so her faith kept her.
Did she ever get married again, have
Oh
children?
yeah, she did get married again. After the Civil War, she married Nelson Davis, and he was 22 years younger than her, but he also had tuberculosis. And so, but he lived up there in Auburn with her, and after he died, she was able to get his pension. It was all part of that $20 a month that the government finally gave to her. But she never did have children. There's one young girl who she is supposed to have adopted, but, but she didn't have any children of her own. Yes.
Were there only 2 stops along her journey to get to the north?
No, there was many, many, many
How
stops.
many would you say that she made?
Well, going to her father's house that one night was 40 miles. A lot of times it'd be 20. So if she went 15, and I think it's like 100 miles only to get there.
Okay.
But sometimes you had to wait it out. Sometimes you were in the swamp for a couple of days. So it just depends. But that last day took 4 days, with her brothers, to get up to Philadelphia. Then it takes longer to get up to Canada, yes.
Is there an estimated number of how many slaves she ran through the Underground Railroad?
Over 319 trips, and it's well documented. I have a book right over there that I've had a lot of my research is done through, and it gives, there's just a lot of records, so on her 19 trips that she did to come back. And there was like 1 year she did 5 in 1 year.
So how many years did it span that she was working with the Underground Railroad?
Well, she escaped herself in 1847, so she went all the way up until actually the beginning of the Civil War. And when she went back to get her youngest sister, but the Underground Railroad had kind of dissolved by that time because so many slaves had run off to the north, and the fugitive slave law was working hard to capture all these white people who were helping. And so she was actually in a lot of danger on that last trip. But her sister, she found out, had died a few months before she came. So she wasn't able to get her out of slavery. Any other questions?
I have a couple unrelated ones.
Okay,
One of them, I read that she was a pretty tough cookie. She
yes,
carried a pistol with her.
yes,
She wasn't afraid of using it.
yes, she had a rifle, yes.
And I was curious, was she educated? Did she get a chance to actually get educated when she was a slave, or?
Not as a slave. Mrs. Horace Mann, some of you may know that name, but she tried to teach Harriet how to read and write, but she just said it just didn't take.
Right.
And maybe because of the stuff in her head, but she knew money very, very well, and she was a very intelligent woman, but she never did learn to read. And I don't know if in the end, this research, it doesn't show that she learned to read, but on YouTube at the Harriet Tubman Museum in Maryland, they have a hymn book that was a favorite of hers where she would write an X. So my question in my mind is, why does she have this hymn book with her if she didn't know how to read? Unless she pointed it and asked someone else to read, but then most of the slaves wouldn't know how to read either. So then it made me wonder, maybe at some point she did learn to read, but I haven't found that research yet.
And I'm sorry, the third question was how many slaves were able, outside of Harriet?
To be free?
Yeah, through the underground.
I don't know if anyone knows that answer, but it would be millions probably. Even in the Civil War, when she was in South Carolina, that one time on the Cumberland River, there was like over 1,000 that night when they went up there that they freed. And then I think there was like 10,000 freed from the first battle or second battle down in the South Carolina area that were freed.
So this is a personal note on my information from you, which is you're a storyteller, you're fabulous. Which is your favorite character, and where can we see you or listen to you more?
All right. I don't know, Harriet is my first one. My children went to Robert Semple School here, and I was telling stories for Reading Across America Week, which around Dr. Seuss's birthday. And so one of the teachers saw me reading, my little group of people said, well, can you get up on the stage and do that? So I got up on the stage and did that, and then Pam had me come to her house. I told her, well, the person I would really like to know the most about is Harriet Tubman. So I've been doing Harriet Tubman, and this is probably like the 5th revision of my time with her. But I have one, it just depends. Right now, I just started one on Coretta Scott King, and I have a friend of mine who's Rosa Parks. And we've done it at 2 of the schools here, and I've done it at 2 senior centers, and it's been very powerful, very well received.
How does your husband deal with you? You have many characters. Does she take her characters in her life when she's preparing?
No, but I'll say this,
Okay.
I believe her favorite is Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was the first one. We did take a trip to Auburn, New York to see her house and go to the cemetery, and that's the one she's been with the longest. So, and I mean, from a historical standpoint, you can make the case that in the century that Harriet Tubman lived, she was probably the most impactful African-American woman for that whole century. So I think Harriet would have to be in the clubhouse.
Yeah. So my Michael Jackson is very different. Very different. And his 60th birthday would be August 29th. So I might be back here on August 29th. I don't know if I'll do it here or somewhere else, but this is my gift to Benicia because I started here as a storyteller. I do a lot of things in Oakland. I do things at the Berkeley Marsh Theater. I don't have anything scheduled. There is a storytelling swap the 4th Thursdays of the month in Orinda at their library. And there's usually a featured teller, and then different people tell a story like for 10 minutes. And I'll do like a 10-minute story on those 4th Thursdays of the month in Orinda. But most of my stuff is in the schools and senior centers. But this is my first one that I have actually done on my own and put together on my own and invited people on my own. So I'm just really happy that you all have come.
Thank you.
Give her one more hand clap for
I do have yeah, you can find me at the Linda D Wright or Linda Wright's performances on YouTube. I have a few things on there from the Berkeley Marsh. And this is Rob Bernard, who is my videographer and putting things up on YouTube. And he has done quite a few things for me. And then Kenya Wright is my other daughter back there who's doing things for me today. And you met my husband. Yes.
Yeah, this isn't a question, it's just a bit of information. We do have a former slave buried in our Benicia cemetery.
Yes, I was just
Mary
asking someone
Lane.
about that the other day, yes.
Mary Lane, and her son was here with his family, and she lived with him, and the home is still here.
Ah,
Yeah, it's right at the corner of West Second and I, and it's right across I from the Paso Opera Funeral Home.
ah.
It's been added onto, but the
Right.
basic thing is still there.
All right, well, I'll have to talk with you later, because maybe one day I'll come up here as her.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.